Wondering how to write the word June in calligraphy? We'll show you 8 different styles and 5 different pens, starting off with any normal regular pen that you have. Let's start with faux calligraphy. I'm going to show you a very, very basic way that you could write the letters in June with faux calligraphy. So I'm going to add thickness to these strokes after I draw them. This is a micron. You can use any pen for this. So for the J, I'm going to start at the bottom here, curve up, and then around, down, and back up through like this. This is just one way to write the J. We'll show you a few more in this video. Next, we'll move on to the U. So the U will just start with an underturn. So we'll come down, curve at the bottom, and head back up. Then the next part of the U starts the same way. We'll come down, curve at the bottom, but then we're going into the letter N. So the letter N starts with an overturn on top. So as we transition from the U into the N, we'll have to switch the curvature of this line. So we'll come up, then at this point, we're going to start curving over and down. Now ideally you would not lift your pen here like I did. This should be one smooth stroke. Next, we'll do a compound curve. So the compound curve is going to start by following this line up. Then we're going to curve to the right. This part will come down and curve around at the bottom and head back up like this. And lastly, the E just kind of looks like a regular E, like this. To make this into faux calligraphy, you're going to add shading on your downstrokes. Anywhere that your stroke comes in a downward direction, you're going to take the stroke that's already there. So let's say it's a thin stroke that looks like this, and then you're going to add thickness to it, like this, and then we'll color it in at the end, or that's optional to color it in at the end to make it look like calligraphy. So on this part of the J, to find the downstroke, you can hover your pen over it. So we'll go out, up, 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 and then here is when we started coming down. So this is where we will add our downstroke. For the U, we're going to start at the top piece here and draw a small line out to the right, which should be the same thickness as the line that you've already done for the J, and then follow this down until it hits the bottom. We only add these shades on the downstrokes, so you don't want to overshade it. So just to show you a blown up view of what that would look like. For this part of the U, we just want to come out to the right and down and stop as you taper down. What you don't want to do is continue shading this all the way here. That's not the style that we're going for. So we'll do the same thing for this piece of the U. Create a thin stroke out to the right, or I'm sorry, a thick stroke that follows this stroke to make it a thick stroke. Okay, and then we're going to do this part of the N. So here we came up, and then we curved around and came back down. So at the point where we're starting to come down is where we'll add that extra piece. Okay, and then for this piece of the N right here, we're going to add thickness. You can either add it on one side or both, depending on your spacing. And then lastly, we'll add it on this part of the E. So you could leave that open, or for each stroke for the E, that looks like this. If you are thinking ahead, then you can start this part of the E so that you actually end up leaving this inner shade open, or you can go back in and color in all of those pieces for your word to make it look like calligraphy. So I'm going to do that now. Now, if you have a really, really thin pen, this part might take a while. So you can also think about how thick your strokes are. You don't want to make them too thick where it takes it too long for you to color them in. Okay, so that's faux calligraphy. Now let's do some basic brush calligraphy. So for a brush pen, the way that you create your strokes, the thin strokes use less pressure, and then your thick strokes use more pressure. So just pressing harder on my pen gives me that variation in stroke. So I'm going to do a variation on the J for this, just to show you a little bit of a different way that you could write it. So I'm going to start by coming down and then curve around and back up. So you can see for this one, instead of starting with a stroke that looked like this, I just started straight at the top. And then the U will come down, so I'm pressing harder on my pen as I come down and then releasing the pressure to go up so that I get a contrast between thick and thin. Okay, same thing here, come down, heavy pressure with my brush pen and head back up, and then I'll show you a different way you can do the N. So instead of coming into the N with a curve on top, you could just come into it like this and then make a straight line down to start the N. This piece will come up with light pressure, down, heavy pressure, up, light pressure. You may notice I'm lifting my pen periodically at the baseline or the header line, so you can certainly lift your pen at those spots, or you could do this all in one stroke. And then the E will finish off like that. So you could leave the J like this with nothing else on top, or you could add a little bit of a kind of entry element like that. And that's how you would do June with a brush pen. And then lastly, I will show you how you can write June in bounce lettering with a brush pen. So for bounce lettering, we're going to make certain parts of the letters go down or up, higher or lower than they normally do to add a little bit of flair. I'm also going to do the J lowercase for bounce lettering just for fun, even though normally you would capitalize your months. But for this style, I like to make it a little bit more casual, which means you can kind of break the rules. Okay, so for the J, I'm going to start here, come down, and then I'm also going to add a little bit of a bouncy flourish to that piece of the J. I'll give it a little dot to show that it's lowercase. Okay, for the U, we're going to start with an entrance stroke. Make this first underturn normal, and then this second underturn I'm going to bring down below the baseline, and then bring this last piece of the N up above. So can you see the difference here? We came down and up a little farther than we normally would. This piece of the N will be regular. Now this second piece, I'm going to come down below the baseline and back up. So watch this. Down and up. This piece right here is coming slightly below the baseline, a little further than I did for the U. It's nice to have a little bit of variation there. And then the E, we'll just go ahead and kind of curl it back into itself. And so that is one way you could do June in bounce lettering. You could also add a little bit of a entry element like this. Even though it's lowercase, it can kind of help round out the word. Okay, so far we've done June in faux calligraphy, brush pen, and bounce lettering. Now let's move on to iPad lettering. So for iPad lettering, of course, you'll need an iPad, you'll need an app called Procreate, and then you'll need an Apple Pencil. And I'm going to use one of our custom designed calligraphy brushes. You can get it for free on our website, and show you how this works on an iPad. So as I press down hard on my Apple Pencil, I get a thicker line, and as I press down with less pressure, I get a thin line. And we've also designed this brush so that the color changes as you go up, down, and up using different amounts of pressure. So this is a great brush to get comfortable practicing on your iPad doing calligraphy. So to do the word June, I'm going to start and just do, let's see, what style do we want to do today? Okay, so if this is my baseline here, I'm going to start this stroke for the capital J, and I'm going to do this all in one motion so it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to curve out, up, then down, and back up like this. So as I came down here, I pressed harder on my pen, which gave it a thicker stroke and changed the color. The U will come down, around, and back up. And so I'm pressing hard as I come down and light as I come up. Okay, this part of the U, I'm going to come down and then up over into the N. So down, up, down. You can zoom in to make your letters a little bit bigger and easier to see. And I love using 2 fingers to tap on the screen to undo, or 3 fingers to redo whatever I just did. Okay, this part of the N comes up, down, up. You may notice that I'm trying to keep my downstrokes parallel to the diagonal lines. Okay, and this is a pretty short word, so the E will just finish us off. And that is how you can write June on an iPad.
I'm going to write June in the Copperplate calligraphy style, which you can see here, using a pointed pen. The nib that I'm using, and this part right here is the nib. the part that has ink on it, which, by the way, I have a separate jar of ink off to the side that I'm dipping it in. But the name of the nib that I'm using is called a Hunt 101, and this nib is very flexible. So if I press down really hard on this nib, I could get a super thick line. So because this nib is flexible, it's kind of hard to control, and you don't need to press as hard as you possibly can when using a flexible nib, but you can get a really thick line. I'm aiming for something not so thick, so I was just doing a little bit of warm up here. If you don't use a pointed pen every day, it's very easy to get rusty, so it does take a little bit of time to get used to the flexibility and also the sharpness of the nib. So I'm just doing a few warm up strokes up here. Now the letter J in Copperplate is a difficult letter because it's very tall. So if this line right here that the lowercase letters are resting on, that's our baseline. The top of the lowercase letters is the waistline or the header line, and this distance is the X height. So that's 1 unit tall. Now the top of the J goes up 1, 2, 3 units tall. 1, 2, 3. I usually make it a little bit less than 3 units. And then the bottom loop goes down below the baseline 2 units. So if the bottom part is 2 and this upper part starts at the 3rd line, then total this is 5 spaces tall. So it's a very tall letter. This is the baseline that I'm aiming for, and this is my X height. Just draw a little X there. I'm going to start it somewhere between these 2 lines and then finish it below the baseline. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces tall. Start about here. Curve and gradually add pressure and then release towards the bottom. And then come up with a thin upstroke to finish the lower loop. Next, I'm going to make the top part of the J, so I'm going to start here, and you can either make this just connected to the top, or you can turn this into a little loop where you would bring it over this way, make a little loop, and then come out to the left with a little bit of a shade and an oval shape like this. Then I'm going to bring an entrance stroke through to finish the loop and go into the letter U. I'm going to have to dip my pen here in a second because I'm starting to run out of ink. Once you can start to see through the hole of the nib, you know that you're about to run out of ink. So I'm going to keep going here. And with a pointed pen, I lift very frequently after almost every stroke, usually after every downstroke. Another challenge about using a pointed pen, especially a sharp one, is that if it's very sharp, it could get caught on the paper, especially when you're trying to make an upstroke. So it's good to go slowly and apply less pressure when you're coming up, and then just enough pressure when you're coming down to make a thick line and try to make it consistent. Now I'm going to show Spencerian with a pointed pen. So a basic Spencerian J comes up with a curved line, down with a straight line, then you add some shading down here, and finish like this. Now the guidelines I'm using right now are for Copperplate or brush pens, and usually the guidelines that you use for Spencerian are smaller. I'm going to show you a fancy J in Spencerian. And then after that, I'll show you how to flourish the word June. Okay, you can see a couple breaks in my lines right here, like at this point and at this point. That's where my nib got caught on the paper. So if that happens, you can just lightly go back in and try to connect. So in Spencerian, the shading on the capital J is only at the bottom of the loop. It's only below the baseline, whereas in Copperplate, the whole stem is shaded. For this ornamental version, I've just added this flourish at the beginning going into the J, as well as extending the last part of the loop to come back around. So to finish the word June in Spencerian. Spencerian is usually done with a pointed pen, but you could also do it on an iPad. And that's what I like to use Spencerian for, is on my iPad. So I'm just kind of testing in the air a few different ways that I could finish this. And this is a one way to flourish this word. There's enough flourishing going on in the J, so I think I'll stop right there. I'm tempted to add more, but I'm afraid it will end up being too much. Okay, so that's more of an ornamental way of writing it in Spencerian. I've rewritten the base of the word June with a brush pen in a copperplate style, but you'll notice that it looks weird because I don't have the bottom loop or the top part of the J. I also didn't finish the E, and that's because those are going to be great spots to flourish. So for the J, you can flourish the bottom loop just like any other descender loop. And in this word, I want to extend it out to the right to help me fill up space below the word. This is a very basic flourish that you can use, coming out to the right with this S curve and then looping back around. For the top part of the J, we're going to make this part pretty wide. I'm also going to turn the top part right there into a loop. Come out pretty wide on this side. And there's a few different options for what you can do with the J. One thing I like doing is looping itself back around like a spiral around here. But I'm going to see what it looks like if I just kind of go like this. That would be a good place to stop, or you could even continue it more with a bigger spiral. There's never just one way to flourish, and that's one of the most fun parts about it. So we'll see what that looks like. Okay, and then I want to fill up some space in this area over here coming off of the E. So I'm going to make a big curve coming off here and go into this S shape. Then I'm going to loop back inside of there. Once again, this would be a good place to stop, but if you want to keep going, you could add a loop in there and then bring this curve around. Notice how I continued this curve and crossed it through the flourish that I already had there from the J. So you could leave it separate, or you could purposely cross through it. Also notice that I'm using a pencil and I am taking advantage of the eraser. I want to see what it would look like if I didn't connect them. I would have to change this a little bit. Okay. So either way is fine, just choose a way. And then because I've drawn it in pencil, then I can go back over it with a brush pen, or you could do this in pointed pen. For this, you can go in either direction, meaning you could start here and go around this way, or you could start at the top and go back. Trying to make the connections seamless. You could add a little bit of shading to the flourishes or just keep them thin. Either way is fine. And I'm not worrying too much about following the exact lines that I have in pencil. I erased all the pencil lines, and now you can see what it looks like with just the flourishes. Another option is you could plan it out on a different piece of paper and then use marker paper like I'm using right now on top of guidelines. If you were to plan the piece out on your guidelines and then you put your marker paper on top, then you could trace the final design.
Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to check the description for tons of free resources on our site on learning calligraphy, and please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so that we can continue making videos like this one.